Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Starry and I am here yet again to react to the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes. This is video number 6, the Weta Workshop, and we are just going to go ahead and get into this. I am really enjoying myself and I appreciate you guys taking the time to join me. So we are just going to go ahead and get into this, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, let's flow.
Weta Workshop was kind of like visiting some wild fantasy land. It's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but without the candy.
I went to the Weta Workshop, which is quite unlike anything I've ever seen in my entire career. And they made everything you see in the film.
They made every single thing?
They made all the armor, all the weapons. Yeah. Richard Taylor, the man in charge. I think he's a genius.
Everybody's a genius, quite frankly,
world-class
who's a part of this team. Like, what are we doing?
Richard Taylor has also been one of the single most important people involved on this production, because Richard has, with enormous dedication and enthusiasm, taken on one of the most difficult jobs.
I think Richard made over 45,000 different items.
45,000?
For the film, including the miniatures and the prosthetics.
So his workload over the 3 or 4 years that he has been involved has just been phenomenal.
He's phenomenal.
A very charismatic guy, so a very great leader. So his people were really devoted to him and to the task, and their work showed it.
How do I inspire in this young group of New Zealand designers and technicians the philosophies and the vision that will carry this film for 5 years and deliver it onto the world stage in a way that's worthy to the written literature?
Oh, it was more than worthy. Oh, it was fantastic.
A like-minded group of young New Zealanders. If you couldn't rise to the highest level of enthusiasm, passion, and professionalism and grasp this task as if it was the most important thing that you've ever taken on in your life, you weren't worthy of the task. We have been blessed with the opportunity to bring a piece of modern English folklore to the screen. So often in fantasy filmmaking, it's necessary that the actor occasionally turns to the audience and throws them a wink. You know, just buy into this, just accept that this world exists. That couldn't happen with the Lord of the Rings. It was imperative that Middle-earth was real.
Kind of like a prehistory, you know, that really kind of worked its way through every fabric of the production.
They did well, because I feel as if it is actually like just the replication of a memory.
A large number of the departments.
You know, I've said that many times before. It feels so real that it had to have happened at some point, even if it wasn't a past life.
And the delivery of the images that we put on screen.
Richard Taylor's philosophy was always ground this in reality, want gritty realism. We're making a historical film, we're not making a fantasy film. To that end, we looked at a lot of historical influences. While we didn't want to make it obvious, like you go, oh look, the elves are Greek, or the dwarves are this or that. We didn't want to make it obvious like that, because that's not what we're doing. What we wanted to create were alternative cultures that look like they could come straight out of history, but you're never quite sure where they're from.
The development of the total physical reality of the creatures was imperative, so that this finely woven tapestry would create a backdrop of heightened reality upon which the actors could play out this incredible story.
What we needed to do was really make them so they were accessible to general audiences who hadn't read The Lord of the Rings as well.
All the elves, the beautiful swords that the elves carry.
Yes, the swords were so beautiful.
The richness of the cultures of these particular characters. Warren Mahi, he looked after the Urukai. He did a lot of the orc design, the goblins, anything that was nasty and spiky came out of Warren's pencil.
What's beautiful about it is that they were given the leeway in the financial budget to do what they needed to do in order to get this done. You know, to have so much detail in each design, even down to the swords, even down to the buttons, like on the uniforms. It's amazing.
Tremendous experience base to draw from, because here are these amazingly talented guys who've been living and dreaming Tolkien for years.
They broke a lot of ground for
can you imagine have been a fan and then being able to get paid money to work on the Lord of the Rings?
On the same floor.
Listen,
in the same set of buildings.
This documentary is so fascinating.
Going on, we would be Above all me, I'd be wandering out to see what they were up to and see what they were drawing, and it was very stimulating because seeing someone else treat any given subject, you've got only one desire, is to have a shot at it yourself.
Everything was kind of thrown into the melting pot, really, and people would give us feedback, and we'd go off and do another day's work, and have something ready for the next design meeting.
Now, Jamie Best-Warwick and Mike Asquith didn't draw. They're sculptors,
and they
can conceptualize through three-dimensional sculpture as quickly as an illustrator can come up with ideas through drawing.
There's no way.
We always start
they
off
could
with tiny little
do a sculpture faster than a drawing.
Tiny little studies that are done extremely quickly that just begin to capture the feeling of form, and then from those, working on top
I love
of
creative people. Oh my
precast,
God,
either
that is
3rd
amazing.
scale busts or 6th scale figures, will conceptualize the characters. It was incredible how quickly he was able to capture Peter's vision and deliver designs that carried on through to final shots on screen.
What orders from Mordor, my lord?
As you step down the stairs, it was like going into a manufacturing zone, but not in the sense of a production. It was like going into the depths of Middle-earth.
Right.
As you came around the corner and stepped into the studio, the enormity of what we were doing began to strike, mostly from the first effect, which was looking at the stone trolls.
Money did this cost to make? Oh my God.
But as you moved through the studio, there were the huge towering miniatures on either side, crammed in there.
So Richard Taylor set about the task of building, as I say, these 58 very, very large miniatures.
On Lord of the Rings, we coined the phrase bigatures.
Bigatures, yeah.
The miniatures that we built at the Weta Workshop were the size of sound stages. Mary McLaughlin and John Baster and the other miniatures teams did a beautiful job to make this immense size.
The mill in Hobbiton, Richard really came up one day and with a photocopy of the sketch. A week later, this incredible model had emerged, which looked exactly like the sketch.
That is
I've never had a picture of this many
amazing.
miniatures. I don't think anybody's had a picture of this many miniatures. Because one of the things that people
How do you delegate?
was,
Well, I guess they know what they're
in many
doing.
cases we
I'm
would
like,
have
how
done
do
a
you
matte
delegate
painting,
something
just
like
use a
that to all the
miniature
different
instead.
people?
Or a miniature
It's
with a
so
slight bit of
much.
matte painted
It's
and
so
blended into
detailed,
live
and they
action.
did this in a
We're doing
week.
a huge number of shots where we're dropping a miniature behind a live action scene, which is wonderful because it means that we get the beauty of the live action, and then we're able to expand it and amplify it and create the environment into which this live action scene will play. And that's pretty neat.
That is pretty neat.
Of course, it starts with the incredible amount of conceptual design.
Right.
Then we roll on and do the three-dimensional maquettes, slowly honing the form and the character and the study of each creature. One of the most enjoyable characters to create for
How
Lord of the Rings was the
fortunate for
creature,
them. They are
the
definitely
Watcher
blessed
of the
to
Water.
work on this.
And it was important. We also wanted the feeling that when it burst out of the water, it would appear to increase in size, sort of like the swelling of an octopus.
That's
or
what
the
I
hairs
felt.
coming up on an angry cat.
Yeah.
So these unusual shell-like structures swell up and open up like these big shells to give the creature added aggression and added size. What appears to be this gummy
That was so
maw
scary.
finally rolls out and becomes a huge set of teeth. I describe it to the guys as if it's this bizarre sphincter. Each tentacle ended in 2 fingers and an opposing thumb. These tentacles can try and find out where the ring is.
Oh, look at that. That's crazy. Is that what it was doing? It was literally trying to find the ring? I am done. How clever.
John Howe has illustrated the Balrog many times, and there was a great number of elements in his original designs that Peter loved.
It's like lava in a thin shell.
Lava in a thin
and the heat
shell.
that it radiates is just phenomenal.
We wanted the feeling that this was some sort of bizarre bull hybrid with a dog. It's got a whip-lashing lizard's tail, these knuckly toes. It's got these large bull horns that come around to the front of its face. Ben Wooten, one of our senior designers, took those original design drawings of John Howes and built on them in close accordance with John's thoughts to create a final large-scale design maquette.
I don't think I could be a part of the horror design team, because that would definitely follow me in my dreams, like every night. There's no way in the world. I don't know how people shut that off. Because what?
Design studio each day to critique our work and give us his thoughts. And as
you know what I mean? It's like every day you're designing and sculpting and just painting, and it's just all consumed with these horror figures.
The other designers with the ideas of what the cave troll could be. And Jamie very quickly,
you got the Balrogs, they got the Kraken, they got the orcs, they got the goblins, they got
moronic, slow, childlike character that has all the trappings of a creature that is relatively quiet and docile until it's provoked into a rage. We wanted the feeling that the cave troll would sit and
I would be like, can I be on the Hobbit design team, please? Can I just work on the little hole in the wall?
It's exposed to the elements. He has these nails that don't so much grow from underneath the quick, but are actually a part of the overall end of the fingers, and these are used as huge shovels for digging into the dirt and helping mine in the mines of Moria,
they were so strong. I don't know how we defeated them.
In winter. This then is skinned and plasticine, carefully detailed.
I didn't even notice the genitals.
To replicate the look of the original design maquette exactly. And it is this larger maquette
so perfectly
that then the digital department scans, and in doing so makes sure that the art of the design team at the Weta Workshop is carried through into the digital realm.
Okay. They did so well.
Now, the department that we oversaw at Weta that required the most extensive amount of work was the realization of the creatures through prosthetics. The most prolific amount of prosthetic work was used on those that are evil in Middle-earth. The Urukai, the goblins, would need to cover, and of course the orcs.
Like a complete...
Peter wanted something special for the goblins.
Different species completely.
We do all kinds of crazy creatures. I think Jamie probably sculpted out the actual faces they have.
Over the length of 3 films, we produced over 10,000 facial appliances.
10,000?
Over 1,800 bodysuits in foam latex.
We brought that in by the container load. Every couple of months, we'd have a new container of foam latex arrive.
How big was your team,
It was purely brought into the workshop to make the thousands of hobbit feet, the suits of Urukai and Orc undergarment bodies.
The foam latex ovens ran 365
The ovens
days
ran
a
365 days a year.
For 3.5
That's
years
crazy.
to manufacture the massive amount of appliances out of 3 huge ovens.
It was amazing how much foam latex we used. I could never have visualized that quantity.
Okay.
All of the prosthetics then had to be washed, seamed,
painted,
and stored on racks ready to go out on set. Prosthetics have a very limited life. Facial appliances only last a day.
The facial appliances
suits only last 6 days before they're requiring to be returned to the workshop for either servicing or to be ground up into foam pellets and thrown away.
Interesting.
On top of that too had to come all the paint and the specific sort of prosthetic materials and makeups in order to service the application on set.
Each day a multitude of characters would be applied into elaborate facial appliances and then put into full foam latex bodysuits.
How long would it take just to get dressed?
Contact lenses,
I cannot.
And the wigs would finally be fitted to create the overall feeling of these unusual creatures.
Wow.
We'd been working for over a year to develop the feet for the hobbits, because we had to make a compound that was both tough yet flexible. In one casting, you could blend it onto the foot and it would invisibly blend around the ankle line while still giving enough support to the bottom of the actor's
wow.
feet. We produced over 1,800 pairs of hobbit feet for the 4 leads alone.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. The feet, yeah.
Taking the feedback from these guys and making little design adjustments. But for a long time, when I would walk, the feet would kind of bounce, you know? They'd kind of bounce a little bit. And now these are actually amazing. I haven't even noticed it. They're really amazing. So what you're trying to do is to get a grip
it's
action.
so realistic looking.
But not too much, because it doesn't actually bend at the knuckle.
I hadn't even thought of that. Because I would see shots of the foot, you know. It's like they're so big.
Kind of have it sitting there. Unless a kid comes to visit the set and you say, "Oh yeah, these are my feet." Sorry.
They'd settle their feet
it's
into
just
these
so remarkable.
Foam latex appliances.
What in the world?
And then over the next hour to hour and a half.
Thank you for suggesting that I watch this, because I probably wouldn't have ordinarily.
Every millimeter of their own feet.
I just didn't know that it would still have this feel, you know, of being in Middle Earth, learning about it. I thought it was going to lose that, and it was going to kind of like having the magician tell you the magic tricks, but it's
the little hair pieces
so intriguing. I like knowing what's happening behind the scenes now.
One hair at a time, every day. So a day in the life of a hobbit was very much a matter of having to know that you were slipping into those sticky, cold, rubbery feet, and then throwing yourself into any environment that New Zealand could offer up for the whole day, and just put up with the feeling on the undersole of your feet.
Okay.
I would go to Weta all the time. I was fascinated with what they were doing. So we all had to have these face casts done. And I went in to have it done.
What she need a face cast for?
I really didn't know
they
what
used
to
her
expect
face
at all. And,
right? It was her face that we saw on screen.
My hair down and put Vaseline or something on my face, and just suddenly, within seconds, first my eyes, then my mouth, and then just everywhere, this enormously thick.
Why did they need to do this to her? I don't understand.
And when they finally took it off, there's like this great suction that happens, and I had this weird like kind of face. It's just really funny.
I have quite a large nose, and it should have been sufficient for Gandalf's, but once you expand the size of your head with facial hair, then your own features might tend to get
is that what?
lost.
Are you kidding? So everyone had a mask on?
The prominence of a nose is
Get
keeps
out.
everything matching. And it took 2 or 3 days, simply because you can design a makeup on
what
paper,
in the world?
but once
Never
you
would have
apply
occurred
it
to me.
a particular face, it may not turn out quite as you intended.
There is no actor involved in Lord of the Rings that sustained more difficult prosthetics time than John Rhys Davies.
Forehead here.
They have to do this. They have to like change it every single day.
Forehead will go on.
A brand new one.
And then we've got the nose and cheek pieces.
They said it only lasts a day.
Come in, his face would be cleaned, his hair put back, a final shave of any stubble,
how long?
and the process began. 4.5 hours later, the
4.5 hours
head appliance, the ears, the silicone facial appliances, the huge amount of hand.
He must have came in like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Moustache was applied to turn John Rhys Davies into the character that you see as Gimli.
I would go back and show them the results of their work as it actually looked on, and show them what they'd done.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Show them.
As you walked into the armor
end
department,
results.
there was a different feeling. There was always a frenzied feeling in the armor department because there was a transformation going on all the time. Certain parts of the armor department had fantastic array of metals and buckles and rivets and all the sorts of things that would hold it all together.
When John arrived, he was able to bring to Weta a level of design knowledge, fabrication, and some of the complexities of the construction of armor that we didn't understand at that point.
Armor is the most impossible thing to understand and to render illustratively because all of these static shapes interact with each other in very, very surprising ways.
Right.
And it's nearly impossible to understand unless you have some fairly serious layman's knowledge about how it works. It's always frightening and astonishing about how beautiful it all is. But I've worn a lot of the real stuff because I'm one of these really thin guys who can get into it all.
He was able to let us know what worked and what didn't, why things were built in a certain way. And that level of inheritance and that level of culture and history that he was able to invest into our armour making process was a wonderful thing for us at that point in the making of Lord of the Rings. Here was two guys that were making a living from the fabrication of plate armour. Stu Johnson
look at that.
And Warren Green.
Okay.
Now, building a forge in the workshop was, Richard was very excited about that idea. And the only way to do that is to get the stuff hot.
I'm loving every moment of this.
And to use a hammer and get it on an anvil and do it the way it should be done.
So to that end, every single piece of armour was originally created in plate steel, hand beaten in the forge here at the workshop. These creatures are only armoured on their fronts. There's no armour on their backs because they would never run from the field of battle. These are the lightweight guerrilla fighting force that are sent out to hunt down the hobbits. They don't carry any heavy armour as they have to travel huge distances at great speed. Their helmets are made in a combination of leather and lightweight steel. The idea of all the spiky bits of leather is so as they're running through the forest, these things will bounce and move around, further creating the level of ferocity in their appearance as they charge along. The orcs aren't bad at making armour, they just make really ugly armour. And their armour is very, very successful, as you can see by this set of leather gauntlets. And their black speech motifs are tattooed into the leather to put their own incantations of evil into the leather surface. The concept behind these
attention to detail, like we would never have known that.
Them to look like cockroaches scuttling in mass, these black, dark, nasty suits of armour. The helmet very much takes on the perception of this huge mouth of this deep sea fish. But the feeling we wanted to get with Sauron's helmet was the feeling of a corpse, of the rotting face of a horse corpse. The intaglio was put on as a photographic process that then was acid etched using sulfuric and hydrochloric acid to eat the surface of the metal to give the appearance that the surface of the steel is crawling with this wicked ivory all over it. Now here is a Gondorian suit of armour from the prologue.
The amount of time that they spent just brainstorming and being creative about each particular set of armor is just fascinating.
But an interesting feature is the way that we've actually glued the hair into the helmet.
You know, the love is in the details.
The makeup department don't need to put wigs onto the actors every day.
Feeling that you used to have when you were standing surrounded by all this armour was that it felt as though it had been discovered on an archaeological dig. It had that sort of realism about it. What was so deceptive is it wasn't. It was made out of plastic, urethane, all those sorts of materials that are so modern today. But in actual fact, the look of it had that detail and realism so well captured that it really did sort of deceive people.
Chainmail is a problem. Chainmail is a cinema nightmare, and there is no convincing way to make any approximation of chainmail without a stroke of genius, and most chainmail in movies is just awful. So they actually devised a way
I wouldn't
of
even have thought that chainmail was so hard to film.
The thing that they developed entirely in the workshop under the guidance of Richard and Dominic, one of his chief geniuses. They devised a machine which would chop it into tiny slices.
This machine is driven by pneumatics, controlled by an electrical servo, and over 3.5 years,
everything from scratch.
12.5 million rings from a length of black alkathene pipe over 12 kilometers of
Who
pipe.
is thinking of stuff like this? It's amazing.
And then 2 gentlemen at Weta sat for the same length of time and hand-assembled those 12.5 million rings into hundreds of garments of incredibly lightweight chain mail.
I have never seen an industry like that.
Right.
This guy happily sort of linking little bits of chain mail together.
All
I
day
think
long.
He said with my armor that he'd linked 80,000
pieces
of chain mail together.
I would not have traded this experience for the world. It's been the most amazing time.
Yeah, I'm sure it was amazing. No matter what it is that you have to do, you know, just to be a part of it. I would have done it happily. Putting together the little chain link. Absolutely.
Business in New Zealand.
Pretty spectacular. I love the hero weapons, and you pick up one of those swords, the hero swords, and you realize you're holding a real sword, a real weapon in your hand. Very well balanced. Incredible craftsmanship, and many of these pieces belong in museums.
Narsil is actually, I'm sure, the only sword that's ever been designed with a hollow pommel, but it's still got enough weight to make it work. So sword fans, please be aware this is the first hollow pommel that has ever appeared on the screen.
Now, all of this obviously takes a huge amount of person power. Over 100 weapons were made in this style, where they're actually made in spring steel, exactly as they were 500 years ago. The fullers are individually ground in by eye against a huge linishing table.
I am in love with this documentary.
To set the balance on the blade.
What in the
hilts
world?
have been hand ground out of either plate steel or cast out of bronze. And a sword like this would take about a week.
A whole week for one sword? No, I don't think that's what he meant.
Lying next to it again is Glamdring, the sword that Gandalf wields so heroically and magically at times. Once again, it has the incantations of the elf.
Yeah, Gandalf knew how to handle that sword.
Crossbar to try and strengthen it in times of battle.
It's so light. Yes, yeah, made by the elves, you know.
I remember the day that I saw Sting for the first time, and it was sort of in its infancy. It wasn't completed yet, but I'd already seen like the elvish inscriptions that they'd done on a metal Sting.
Now, Sting has the same cultural inheritance as Glamdring does, Gandalf's sword.
You know, Boromir's sword is a strong man's sword. It's made for someone with very, very thick wrists.
A one-handed fighting sword. It's actually a hand and a half. You can fight with it single-handedly, but the pommel is extended enough that if you want to draw into a two-handed blow, you have got the space to put your hand up onto the crossbar.
Perfect.
The swords have to be balanced quite comfortably through just in front of the crossbar. It makes for quite a beautiful fighting sword. Sean Bean was very enjoyed flinging this weapon around.
When you do get your sword,
that becomes quite
personal to you, and you get familiar with it. But you feel as though it is part of your body. I mean, it's an extension of your arm, and we all took great pride in that.
Legolas carries a quiver of arrows on his
back.
We made over 10,000 arrows for Lord of the Rings.
Look at this. 10,000 arrows.
And every species has a different sort of arrow. Every arrow has its own head design. This has got a little floral motif on the actual blade of the head.
Look at that.
It carries a green fletch. But carried in his quiver are the white knives, his fighting knives. And you can see it has got an elven etching down the blade. The handle is inlaid with a gold etching that's laid into the timber. It's got boxwood as the timber of
just the amount of detail. I can't say it enough.
Back and he's able to draw both at the
because
same
the love is in the details. They didn't have to put all those details in. We're not going to see that just watching it. The only way we would know that that is there is through the behind the scenes and a close-up of it. You know what I mean?
Throwing axes. These are carried at his side.
It's just so amazing that they went to those links to make it real, right? To make it an immersive experience that it was.
As a walking stick as he walks along, but always at the ready in case of an enemy nearby.
Right.
And then finally his double-headed axe, which he most commonly likes to use when taking on the orc. This he carries on his back. By a shrug of his shoulders and a flick of the wrist, he can pull it out of the back holster and quickly grab it, ready to take on the enemy. But Vigo, of all the actors, chose almost predominantly only to use the hero's sword.
I used it as much as I could, yeah, because it just would look more right, and also just the weight of it.
Oh, his name is Vigo.
How tired you would become, you know. It looks silly when you do a big battle sequence if everybody's like, all the time, you know.
He said to me, so how would I keep it sharp?
I asked for a sharpening stone. Because you're fighting that many times and you're parrying that many times. I mean, you need to sharpen your sword now and then.
So indeed we went ahead and cast up a little urethane replication of a whetstone. So that in theory, Strider could sharpen the edge of his sword. Built into the scabbard was a little utility knife.
Things like the eating knife that's part of the scabbard of the sword. It's just a practical thing, you know. What do you clean a rabbit or a deer with? You're not going to use your sword, you know what I mean?
Right. I remember he came in and he was just really quiet. He was just really quite quiet, and he had this sort of steely look about him. And he was like, "Can I take this? Can I take this with me?"
Vigo treated that sword as if it was almost a holy relic that he carried by his side. The greatest
he said, "Can I take the sword?" I love that.
Weta Workshop, having taken on the 5 departments that we did, was that the singular Tolkien-esque brushstroke could be applied across as much of the workshop as possible.
Yeah.
I was able to understand Peter's thoughts and then invest those thoughts through the designers into the individuals within the workshop.
It's just been phenomenal. His workshop is packed with stuff, and he has a huge team of people. They have really led the charge in creating the different cultures of the various races of Middle-earth and the look of the weapons and swords. And without that team of people, these films would never have gotten made. It's as simple as that.
Right? Oh, that was fantastic. Just fantastic. My goodness. I loved every moment of that, of course. I don't know how interesting it is to sit and watch this, just like in awe, but I am really thoroughly enjoying myself, and I appreciate you guys joining me. So that is going to be the end of that one, and I will come back with the next few videos later. All right, until next time, let's flow. Okay, I'm back. I had to take a quick break. I had to get something to eat, and what I was eating was very messy, so I could not eat it while I was watching this behind the scenes documentary, which is phenomenal. I just finished watching the Weta Workshop, and now I'm going into costume design number 7 for the Lord of the Rings. Thank you for joining me. Let's flow.
Nyla Dixon, who's our costume designer, did an incredible job. We set up a sewing room for her, and she had her 40 seamstresses working in there, creating over 19,000 costumes.
19,000 costumes.
That's far too easy a concept than what she actually had to tackle.
It was very collaborative, Lord of the Rings. The fact that Richard really had been developing the concepts for Lord of the Rings, a lot of things were already in train before the wardrobe department ever showed up on the doorstep. I would say it probably took me a good 3 months to actually get how huge and complex this was.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd grasped it on any level. In an incredibly short period of time, you have to try and
keep all of this
absorb an
organized?
incredible amount of information. As you can see, there's a few frocks in this wardrobe department. The very first thing that you have to do is you've got to break out that script and work out how many costumes are going to be required. So that meant that we had to make the lead actor's costume 10 times, and then we had to make the body double's costume 10 times, and then we had to make the mini-me costume 10 times, and then we had to make the stunt double costume 10 times. So there are about 40 costumes of that one design. What I tend to do is you're always thinking about it. And the breakdown of the script, the budgeting of it, the costumes are moving through your mind all through that time. And there'll be little doodles appearing here and there, and you know, you'll break away from the figures to do some of the research. I looked at every Tolkien book.
You gotta calculate the budget too.
All of John Howe and Alan Lee's illustrations. They suggest rather than say. So my role was to take that suggestion and say what they were wearing. The shirt and the trousers last night.
Yeah.
Everything about the hobbits, descriptive-wise, was these very country, and I wanted to use a lot of that sort of 18th century design style, the little frock coats, the waistcoats, all of those things that are really quite English. And that naturally, with these big feet, took me to the idea of chopping off their trousers so that they're kind of wearing these wacky little half-mast pants.
It absolutely made me feel more like a hobbit, especially with the feet on. And the wig, it had that hobbit image. So the clothes were kind of essential, and you know, it would be the first thing I'd put on the day that would begin my process into being a hobbit.
The Aragorn costume, we workshopped that one so much with Vigo.
Nyla was wonderful in that she allowed me to be part of that process, you know?
Oh, look at that. He was a part of this process too,
huh? The character and give Peter something first and foremost that visually appealed to him and felt right, but for me was comfortable.
The idea was that this was a man of great travel, so it needed to be very flexible. And it needed to look like this guy had slept in any cave or crevice.
It did.
And travelled.
Looked like he slept in a cave.
Great distances. Viggo Mortensen, who played this character,
he always looked
really
like he was
into this idea that he himself had repaired it. When
you know what I'm saying?
When it starts to sort of come apart. It's got
slept outside
certain
all the time.
Medieval
That's what he looked like.
Ideas in this attached sleeve, which I actually think is a very practical thing as well. I mean, if it gets too hot, this can be detached and then just whipped back on.
Oh,
it was
okay.
a choice of mine to go for this really beautiful green, which a lot of discussion about this costume is it's black. Well, it's not, let me tell you. This is a beautiful licorice green colour. It's in places like this that we felt that we could just slip in the sense that he came from, or was given things that were much more regal. With the elves, I wanted the Rivendell elves to feel different to the Lothlorien elves. How we went about that was a slight colour shift. There's a bit more colour around the Rivendell elves and around the Lothlorien elves. What I was looking for was the sense that these people were not of this earth, this Middle Earth. You wanted the sense that these people sort of floated through the landscape.
Yeah.
So I hung all the elf costumes off the tops of their bodies, so giving them as much length as I possibly could to accentuate this idea that these elves were much taller than man. Galadriel is the ultimate elf. She is our most white, our most beautiful. We used the most glorious beaded fabrics that we could get our hands on. And for the men,
everything she wore was very elegant.
You do want them to have an incredible presence. So we went for quite a sort of high collar, smooth, hanging in these huge sleeves, that the idea when they lifted up their arms that they would fall back. And I wanted a relationship between the elven costumes and the wizards, because I think there is a relationship between those two. With Saruman, I wanted to create the sense this is the head of this order. I wanted a grandness, and I also wanted him to have the stature of an elf. This is the costume of Saruman the White, who was played to perfection by Christopher Lee. The concept behind this costume was to give it as many textures as we possibly could. And so the way we went about it was to use different textures in the fabrics themselves. And a lot of these sorts of things don't come up on camera in a huge way, but what they do is they just give it much more life.
It's also slightly worn. It wouldn't be brilliant, glowing white. It couldn't be after thousands of years or hundreds of years. So they were very clever there. They said it must look not exactly shabby, but worn.
We've really aged this costume down. It's quite extreme at times.
They really
we've actually sort of put quite a bit of life into that breakdown. Again, looking for elements that were going to create that sense of age. He's been a wizard for a long time.
Yeah.
It would be wise, my friend.
Tell me, friend.
There's a lot of drawings of Gandalf. In fact, he is the one who appears in more images than anyone else in the most defined way.
Oh, okay.
In the discussions with Peter constantly referred to a drawing of John Howes. And I went, why don't we see if we can make this come off the page? The actual gown of Gandalf came together really, really easily. The idea was that this man needed to look like he never took this costume off. He
right.
liked that idea of
You
bits
lived
of
it. It
twig
was
and
very
leaf
lived in.
caught up in it.
I was always concerned that there should be mud on the fringes of the long robe, and if he'd been riding, that there should be splattered mud further up the costume.
Then we began work on this hat. I mean, I can still remember the look on Ian's face as the hat was handed to him. There was just this imperious kind of, like this. And then he popped it on his head. And it's one of those magical moments where
my goodness,
even
if the character
Ian
from that
had
book
to admit
did not just come
that
alive
suddenly
in Gandalf,
was in the room with us.
I just don't know.
Because that was
Look
her
at that.
intent, is to make this. Forget any other movie that she's done. Forget whatever movies you've done. You're here, you're playing this character. Let's make this work. And let's make it look interesting as well. And she did that.
That looks exactly like that picture. Okay, next one. Number 8. New Zealand.
For me,
as Middle
Hobbiton
Earth.
was going to be the thing that was going to take forever. I just couldn't imagine we'd find Hobbiton intact as we found it outside of a little town called Matamata in the North Island.
Sort of went up through here. Then that way you can stand over near where Rick was.
I remember the first time we went there and went through this one gate, and there was Hobbiton. You know, there was the lake, there was the Partyfield tree, there was the hill that Bag End sits. It was just right out of the book.
Love that.
And maybe the Partyfield then is, you know, just over the back there.
To this day, if you were to go visit it, it will always feel like Hobbiton. It's just a great spot.
The Weathertop Ruins, we found a brilliant location for it. It was up in the Port Waikato area, great sort of limestone washed away. There's a hilltop and it drops away quite rapidly.
Look at that.
Below.
Okay.
This is the hollow on the western side of Weathertop.
In terms of the location, we never intended to build anything. The Weathertop that you see in the movie exists in physical form in terms of the wide shots because of a visual effect shot. And with respect to once the hobbits are at the summit and surrounded by the wraiths and then saved in turn by Aragorn, you know, that's actually just a soundstage. So the location itself never had to deal with a build. And as a result, that was the location that, you know, we could sort of, you know, hump the equipment in or chopper the equipment in to kind of do on the day.
Lucky. How fortunate.
This was the great watchtower of Amundsen.
So
horse chase basically culminates in the riders chasing Arwen across the river. There's the angle, which is the profile, where you've got Arwen on one side, the other horses starting to cross, and around the corner comes a flood.
That was surprising to see.
Yeah. In this particular place, there were 10,000 people. And here in Skippers, this is the township, but there were 10,000 people at the height of the gold rush, and that bridge didn't exist, and this was actually their ford, the real ford.
Kaitoki is the water collection region for Wellington, for the whole city of Wellington, but it has beautiful forest, and it has a lovely river running through it, and a sort of Rivendell type feel.
Kaitoki is one of those places that it's a national park, and it's the kind of place that you would go and reflect at. You know, sort of a very sacred place that you can go and rest in. And it worked perfectly as the backdrop of Rivendell.
Very interesting.
This is the idea with this is it's the Lothlorien woods. Now we're in a different forest, a different part of the story.
Paradise is this beautiful forest area just out of Queenstown. It's essentially an old beech forest that has a major canopy of leaf, and underneath the ground is covered in very soft, very vibrant green moss, which just covers everything. It's a nice sunny day here at Fernside in Featherston. One of the huge attractions of this particular area was lots of lovely oranges and reds and greens in the leaves, which we have lost a bit with the onset of winter, but we've managed to add a few, you know, in the right places, so it's working okay.
Yeah. Well, let's just go up to the bridge and then we'll just have a little bit of a cruise back. So we're just looking, Andrew, for some sort of a shot which would give us the, you know, the gorge that leads under the Argonaut. Yeah.
Look at this. My goodness. Just so much that you don't even consider. That, of course, they have to go scout out different locations and try it out themselves. How long did this take to make? Did the movie take to make? Because just including like all of the preparation.
Let them get a little bit of work further away. Where we could stick the big statues down there somewhere. The Argonaut.
Look at that. Wow.
This is an absolutely gorgeous piece of landscape, and if someone doesn't find something to help get this into the show, you're all mad.
You're all mad.
So this is the sort of thing way we'd shoot them arriving on the shore of Nen Hithol, just to get a sense that the forest comes right down to the shore.
Paradise, we shot the Pathgallen section of it, which was the approaches to the Eamon Hen seeing seat, and where there was a lot of battle between the Fellowship and the Uruk-hai.
Yeah, we do have to find a good place for Boromir's.
I really enjoy learning about the locations.
So yeah.
Right, what they did to find these spots. Like you have to literally
deer to cats.
Scope it out and imagine from different angles which scene goes where
alongside Lake Wakatipu,
where the designs go. Like that is amazing.
Closer to Queenstown.
Who is doing all of this?
On a beautiful little promontory above the lake.
Okay, that was the end of that. Okay, so I'm going to pause it here before we get to the second disc of the appendices. I'm enjoying it. I can't say it enough. You're right. It is really, really just amazing. Like, this is an amazing journey behind the scenes. I didn't expect it to be so compelling, right? I didn't expect it to be so immersive, so detailed. This project is, I would have to say, the biggest like movie project ever, right? Because just what they 10,000, the numbers that they're throwing out, like 10,000 costumes and 30,000 whatever it is, like it, it's so much. It's so much time spent on it, so much creativity, so much attention to detail, so much love went into this. I mean, you really did have to be like passionate about this, right? Every single day. I loved learning that there was someone who literally spent time just putting together chain links in order to make them look realistic. Like, I understand that level of devotion, and the fact that I'm pretty sure everyone who was involved in the project were fans, like huge fans of the Lord of the Rings beforehand. So, just knowing that level of dedication was involved, that level of reverence for the project itself was involved. It's just amazing. It just melts me. It melts my heart, and it just never stops. So I'm really interested to see what what more there is, because I feel like we've covered a lot already. So just looking at the Weta Workshop, that just blew my mind. Like they said, you go in there and it's like a miniature version of the whole complete set, right? And it's just fascinating. The whole process is fascinating. And it is a little weird to see the cameras and stuff inside of Middle Earth, but I don't know. It's also it also feels really good because it's like peeling back that curtain and seeing how it all how it was all created, how the miracle all unfolded, right? I'm just loving it. I'm just loving every moment of it, I must say. So thank you so much for joining me, and wrap this up really quickly. I will see you guys next time for the second disc. All right, until next time, let's flow.